access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good evening, I'm broadcasting live from Maryland in the USA from the CPAC conference. We are today 30 days into the new Trump administration. The energy, the excitement is extraordinary. Tonight on the show we'll discuss the Ukraine deal. Is there more for us to hear? But are we giving a fair deal to the Ukrainians? JD Vance on the stage here this morning, reiterating every word he said in Munich about the failings of Europe and what's gone wrong. We'll debate that. And joining me later in the programme, Tim Kennedy, former UFC expert, will talk about how UFC and Trump have become so closely associated. But before all of that, let's get the news with Sam Francis.
Nigel, thank you very much indeed, and good evening to you. It is exactly 7 o'clock, and the top story tonight: the UK and Norway are ramping up their defence efforts in the Arctic as Russia's growing aggression has sparked urgent talks between the two nations. The Defence Secretary met with his Norwegian counterpart earlier as the UK pushes to protect vital undersea cables from potential Russian sabotage. And with tensions growing since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine, John Healey declared Britain is determined to lead in European security, bolstering NATO and strengthening defence in the High North. The move comes amid fears of Russian interference in key European infrastructure, including in the Baltic Sea. Well, speaking earlier, John Healey also vowed to step up further support for Ukraine, saying we must keep them in the fight.
Our job is to stand with the Ukrainians, support the Ukrainians, support them in their fight, and if they choose to talk, support them in the negotiations as well. And I'm a defence minister, and I don't want to see us jeopardising the peace by forgetting the war.
John Healey there speaking earlier this afternoon. Well, the US Vice President says everything is on the table in Russia-Ukraine negotiations, echoing President Donald Trump's stance on a possible resolution with Russia. JD Vance spoke earlier at the Conservative Political Action Conference in Washington, tackling US ties to Europe and the war in Ukraine. On Europe, he says the US will maintain important alliances, but says their strength depends on whether European countries move, he says, in the right direction. And Vance also defended Trump's recent call with Vladimir Putin, arguing that peace is in the interest of both the United States and Europe.
He wants the killing to stop. He wants to bring lasting peace to Europe. He doesn't just want to stop it now and have the war restart a month from now. He wants to bring lasting peace to Europe because the president believes this, and he's absolutely right. Peace is in the interest of Russia, it's in the interest of Ukraine, it's in the interest of Europe, but most importantly, peace is in the interest of the American people.
Back here at home, the Army has apologised to the family of teenage soldier Jaisley Beck, admitting it failed to protect her before she sadly took her own life. A coroner ruled the 19-year-old's suicide followed an intense period of unwelcome behaviour from her boss, who sent thousands of messages to her on WhatsApp. Her mother says no apology will ever bring her daughter back, after Beck also reported a separate senior soldier for alleged sexual misconduct.
No apology will ever bring our daughter back. This message to Sir Keir Starmer, our government, things need to change. The army cannot be allowed to investigate itself anymore when it comes to cases of sexual harassment, assault, bullying and abuse.
The Culture Secretary will question BBC bosses about a documentary on Gaza that was narrated by the son of a Hamas official. The broadcaster has been criticised for the programme, which centred on a 13-year-old boy who is the son of Hamas's Deputy Minister of Agriculture. Speaking to the media today, Lisa Nandy said she would discuss the matter with the BBC's Director General and Chairman. The BBC, though, said it had not been informed of the family connection in advance of the film's production and has apologised for the admission of those details. And royal news, the Prince and Princess of Wales are set to visit South Wales next week ahead of St David's Day. Catherine, of course, continuing her return to duties after cancer treatment, will join William in Pontypridd on the 26th of February. The couple will meet locals affected by flooding from Storm Bert and Storm Dara in December. And they'll also tour a local market, helping to prepare Welsh cakes and explore a community garden and woodland. What a way to spend the afternoon. Those are the latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. Now, let's head straight back to Maryland and Nigel Farage.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Yep, it's the annual CPAC conference, and today falls on day 30 of the Trump administration being in power. And boy, they have been moving at breakneck speed on a variety of issues, including one that Trump promised during the campaign and actually for the previous 2 years that he would address, namely the war in Ukraine. And as you well know, negotiations have begun. He spoke at length on the phone to Vladimir Putin, and the teams met in Saudi Arabia earlier on this week. J.D. Vance this morning speaking here at the conference, backing up that the aim and the objective that the Americans have is to be the broker for a lasting peace. But there were some comments that Trump made yesterday about Zelensky from Ukraine that have led to, well, let's say, some degree of controversy. But let me ask you at home, is peace on the way? What do you think? Farage at GBNews.com. What I would say is we haven't heard everything yet. It's slightly premature to rush to judgment on what this will look like by the end. This is a process, it's a negotiation, it's going to take weeks, maybe months to fully complete. What would be good is if we could head towards a ceasefire at some point in the next few weeks. Do I agree with every single word the president says? Look, the old saying, and it's true, you should always take Trump seriously, but not necessarily always take him literally. And all I can say is thank goodness somebody is trying to look for a peace deal after nearly 3 years and something like 1 million battle casualties. Just think about that for a moment. Joining me here live at CPAC, K.T. McFarlane, former Deputy National Security Advisor to this great country, author, many other things, and someone that knows Donald Trump's mind and the way that he works pretty well. Well, he said he'd attempt peace. Is he off to a good start?
Oh, he's off to a fantastic start. I mean, if you think back to the Biden administration, they said they had determined, well, we could never trust Vladimir Putin to keep a deal, therefore we're never going to sit down and negotiate with him. And so what's the answer? Well, we're just going to keep going on and on and on, and a forever war that's going to be frozen, a war of attrition. President Trump comes in and says, well, if you're going to have a deal, you got to sit down at the table, so let's talk. And I think that's where he's going. And, you know, somebody told me once, and this is a way of really understanding President Trump, he's a real estate developer. Yep. He doesn't think in terms of 6 months, 12 months, a year. He thinks in terms of 20 years. So he's looking at Ukraine, and he's thinking, what's the long game here? Ukraine isn't going to win a war against Russia. It's never going to happen, no matter how much aid you give them. But Ukraine could win the peace. Now, how do they win the peace? Yeah. Because we go in and help them develop their rare earth minerals and a lot of their natural resources.
I mean, look, America could go in, could develop mineral resources. It could be good for American companies. Equally, if the deal's right, very, very good for the Ukrainian economy as well. And I get that, and I understand that. I guess the biggest problem here, and nuances and perceptions are different. You know, there's a very big ocean between yourselves and Europe, whereas for Poland, for the Baltic states, for others, you know, this is happening right on their doorstep. And they've seen, wave after wave, Putin expanding Russia. So surely what we also have to do here, not just get Putin to the table, that's been done and that's a good thing. Somehow, Ukraine is going to need some security guarantees, isn't it?
Yeah, and here's how you get those security. There's several ways to skin this cat. Number one, why was Putin able to invade Ukraine during the Biden administration, during the Obama administration, not during the Trump administration? Because economic situation, Donald Trump's energy policies, frankly, bankrupted Russia. They didn't have the money to go to war. I don't trust Vladimir Putin, but if he doesn't have the money to go to war, he can't go to war. So President Trump's energy policies are going to once again put Russia in a position where it doesn't have the money. The other thing is, one of the ways you guarantee their security is, look, if the United States is in there, and a lot of the rare earth minerals are in eastern Ukraine, if we're in there on the ground, American engineers, American, mining areas. Do you really think the Russians are going to go across the border and kill Americans to get into Ukraine? And then the third thing is, once Ukraine is integrated into the Western economy, the other issues aren't as important. Ukraine could be Poland. And I want to tell you, the first week that Donald Trump was in office last time, he took a phone call from Angela Merkel, and she immediately said, "What are you going to do about Ukraine?" And he said, "Well, what are you going to do about Ukraine? It's your neighborhood, not mine." Clink. And when you look at the other countries in Europe, not Poland, not Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, but where's the money? What are they showing up with? They're not putting their money where their mouth is, which is one of the reasons they're not at the table.
This is a big point, because President Clinton, President Obama, I think even Bush said to European nations, we're not going to go on paying the lion's share of NATO. It's not fair on American taxpayers. You guys are relying on us. And kind of Trump said it in his first term, and quite a few countries did increase their spending. But are we now at a point with NATO where, unless they get serious, there's a real possibility that America says, guys, we're not going to go on with this?
What kind of an alliance is it if one country is providing the security for everybody else? It's not much of an alliance. And when President Trump is, look, it's a shock treatment. He's like taking him by the shoulders and say, pay up, pay up, pay up. Unless you do, we might leave. And maybe that's what it takes, because as you point out, going back to Kennedy, our presidents have said, you're not paying your fair share. Barack Obama called the European allies freeloaders, but only Donald Trump was able to get them to take some money out of their pocketbook and pay.
Well, I hope after all the disunity that was seen in Paris last week in terms of how European countries respond, I hope they're listening. Final thought on all of this, and it's probably quite low down the American agenda, because you've got Ukraine, you've got Middle East, all these huge issues. But the Chagos Islands, Diego Garcia, that military base, it really does matter to America, doesn't it?
It is a huge aspect of the U.S.-British, security situation. We test our weapons there. It's a great base for us to use. For our Navy, for our Marines, it's an essential thing. It's something that Britain can do for us that we can't really do for ourselves. And then what if Britain leaves? Who comes in? China's going to be there in a 5-minute second. They're going to come in and they're going to do what they've done to the islands in the South China Sea, what they've done to the Panama Canal.
But we'll be told, Katie, oh, no, the treaty won't allow it.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Look at the Panama Canal. The Chinese control both edges of the Panama Canal. Look at Hong Kong. What have they done with Hong Kong? Look at those islands in the South China Sea where the Chinese said, oh, no, we're just going to put a few fishing vessels there. Well, now they're fully militarized islands. That's the future of Diego Garcia, if you leave.
Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Back to the studio in London, where I'm joined by former Minister Tom Pursglove and Eric McElroy, who is a member of Democrats Abroad and host of the American Exchange podcast. Eric, you heard Katie McFarlane there. Are you satisfied with what Trump's doing in Ukraine?
Well, I mean, he said that he was going to create peace on day one, and as you mentioned, we're day 30, although it feels like it's day 562 that Trump has been in office. I mean, there's one person responsible for this war. There's one person who could bring peace tomorrow, and that's Vladimir Putin. He's the one that started this war. He's the one who could end it right now. And I think the responsibility and burden should be placed solely on him. And victim shaming the Ukrainian people is totally the wrong way to go, which is what Donald Trump is doing right now.
Okay, Tom. Obviously, you were there in government when this war started. Boris was a big cheerleader for defending Ukraine. Is there enough so far in what you've seen for Ukraine?
So I think that actually we should be proud of the consensus that we've had in the United Kingdom in supporting Ukraine. We should all be very concerned about Western security. I actually welcome the fact that the US administration has brought about having these peace talks. I hope that they will move forward. I hope that they will be more inclusive. But I also do accept actually that there is a greater role for us to play within NATO, particularly when it comes to spending. That alarm was raised many years ago by the Obama administration. I don't think the UK government has gripped that soon enough. I think the time has come. But what is clear is that we and the Americans need to play our part, along with our European neighbours, in providing those security guarantees that you've touched on. And I think that Boris has raised a very good point as well about unlocking some of those sanctioned funds to pay for some of this, if that helps to move this forward.
Yeah, something like $200 billion worth of Russian assets being held, I'm told, in Belgian banks at the moment. Eric, NATO has been there since the late 1940s. Trump, it always appeared in the past, Trump would threaten NATO members just to get them to pay more. But do you get the feeling that if Europe doesn't pay up, this really could become a major rift?
Well, I mean, it could. I mean, you have to kind of wonder why Trump is doing some of the things he's doing. He's always admired authoritarian figures like Putin. Is this going to give him, if he gives Ukraine to Putin, does this help him justify going into Panama and Greenland and his own imperialistic desires, rather than, and potentially leaving NATO as he's doing in the past as well? I mean, if anything, the one thing that Putin has done is unify NATO more than ever before Trump came back into power, in getting Finland and Norway to join. So the opposite has been true all along for what Putin has done. He's overplayed his hand. Again, it's his fault that we're in this situation, and that's where the focus should still be.
Well, more members may have joined NATO, that's certainly true, and more members are paying 2%, but very few are actually taking defence really seriously. And Eric, when it came to Paris last week, sitting round the table, the European leaders couldn't agree on anything.
Well, we know that you're a fan of how Europeans agree on things, but they should definitely, this is a crisis that's happening in Europe, but it's a crisis that's affecting Western democracies all around the world. So I think for the U.S. to step away from it is not the right way to show leadership in this. Yes, push our European allies to do as much as they can, but keeping the pressure on Russia from a united Europe and a united U.S. and a united NATO is a much more effective way to get things done and negotiate on behalf of the people of Ukraine.
Final thought, Tom, on this segment. Is Keir Starmer right to try to be a bridge between Europe and America?
I would always hope that a UK Prime Minister would fill that role as part of the international negotiations and to make sure that we're showing leadership here in Europe. I really welcome that, actually, and I hope that, as I touched on, that political consensus that we've seen in this country, where there has been a real unity of purpose in supporting Ukraine, will continue to hold. I think when you look around the continent, Germany's obviously in a state of flux with an election imminent. President Macron has got real political challenges at home. I don't see many alternatives, actually, to Keir Starmer in taking the lead on this, given that geopolitical environment and those domestic situations at home in those respective countries. And I would always want the UK to be at the forefront of that. I think we need to match that with resources. I don't blame President Trump for raising that point, but I do hope that we can move this forward in partnership with the US to move this situation along. There's been far too much bloodshed. This is an appalling conflict. President Putin's aggression should be called out for what it is, but we do need to see peace, and I hope that's where we'll get to. Well, there'll be some big conversations in the White House next week when Keir Starmer arrives there.
we're going to take a break, but after that, let's have a look at what JD Vance said on the stage here this morning, very much backing up what he said at the Munich Security Conference just a few days ago.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Coldplay?
Coldplay. It was
Steve Martin, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They did a gig.
Chris Martin. Chris Martin.
Have
they
apologised
for being British?
Yeah,
They did.
they were
They
playing
did,
on
yes.
Patrick Christie's programme, I think, last night, weren't they?
Yeah, he was saying...
The clip was, they said they were playing in India somewhere, and they said, you know, thank you very much for a wonderful reception. We almost didn't expect it, and they sort of apologised for being British.
Thanks for welcoming us despite being British.
Yeah, that's right. Mm.
No. I mean, that's a disgrace.
Yes, it is.
I mean, that's absolutely terrible. Why can't we be proud to be British?
It's becoming the norm to feel that you have to apologise all the time for being British, and I think that's wrong.
I think Bono did it about 20, 30 years ago when he was touring with U2, didn't he?
Well, stop it. Let's be proud.
He sang a song.
We've got a lot to be proud of in this country, and it's wrong to make it, and especially if and it probably is filtering down to our children.
Yeah.
This feeling that you've got to apologise for being British, for heaven's sake.
Well, it's back to that old image, isn't it, of an England flag being viewed, someone flying an England flag, and you sort of tut and raise your eyebrows at it, which is just so wrong. You don't get that with any other flag, do you? That we're just meant to be embarrassed by it all.
Yeah, we've got to stop that. We really have.
Yeah, love being British. Wouldn't want to be anything else. Thanks very much
No,
indeed.
I like being British.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I asked you for some of your thoughts. Is peace on the way in Ukraine? Some of your reactions. John says, I'm fully in support of Ukraine, but I've watched Trump since the first primaries. His comments yesterday were, in my opinion, part of the negotiating process. These are his trademarks. Well, yeah, actually, as I said earlier, we haven't seen the full shape of this. We mustn't rush to judgment. Jane says, Russia invaded a sovereign territory. Trump should tell him to get out of Ukraine, not reward him by offering up Ukrainian land as a reward. What part of America would Trump give up to appease an invasion of the USA? Well, nothing is the answer. And finally, Mick says Trump is right to highlight the insincerity of European nations who want American support but won't pay. However, his stance towards Putin is odd because everyone knows he's a murderous liar and he can't be trusted. Is Trump misjudging him? If he is, it's very out of character. Now, in the hall this morning here, we had JD Vance on the stage. He was asked about the speech that he gave at the Munich Security Conference, and even the question prompted a standing ovation from the crowd here. Let's just listen to what JD said this morning.
The greatest threat in Europe, and I'd say it was the greatest threat in the United States until about 30 days ago, is that you've had the leaders of the West decide that they should send millions and millions of unvetted foreign migrants into their countries. That is the biggest threat to Europe. Got to give the populations of the world the opportunity to speak up and say, no more of this BS. We want borders. We want sovereignty. We want to be able to speak our own mind in our own country.
So there he was, absolutely clear. He said the kind of countries that we respect, they have national sovereignty, they protect their borders, they defend free speech. And basically what he's saying is that Europe and the European Union is going in the wrong direction. Well, the response that he got from those European leaders didn't surprise me at all. It reminded me actually of my days in the European Parliament, giving similar speeches and getting screamed and shouted at by everybody. But was JD right? Is the biggest threat that Europe faces internal from millions of people, undocumented, that have come in? And hey, just in the course of the last week, we've had terrorist attacks taking place in Germany and in Austria. Tom Pursglove, JD is not mincing his words when it comes to what's going on in Europe, but would you see yourself that he does have a point?
I think that it's fair to say that illegal migration in particular is causing a major crisis of confidence in this country, but also in other major European societies. I think when you look at some of the rulings that we're seeing from the courts, it feels like day to day now we are seeing totally bizarre rulings, stuff to do with chicken nuggets, stuff to do with people not being able to be removed because of the climate, where we've seen coach and horses driven through the Ukraine refugee scheme, for example. I do think that that does lead to questions around legitimacy. I think that that brings into question the judiciary. I think it brings into question the government. I think it actually brings into question many of the international frameworks that we operate in, including the Refugee Convention. So in that sense, I do accept that there is a major concern here. That is a concern that is growing by the day. And that's not to mention, for example, some of those national security threats that are clearly presented by individuals arriving in countries illegally in the way that we've seen, and that's why robust action is needed to stop that. But we also need to see more proportion when it comes to some of the judicial rulings too.
Eric McElroy, this was, the impact of Munich was quite significant, and of course there's no backtracking, no apology in any way at all. Whilst the other European leaders might not like it, do you think JD's got a point?
Well, no. I think that the demonization of people as migrants coming across in both sides of the pond is unnecessary, unproductive, and unhelpful and cruel. Making asylum seekers illegal is a problem in and of itself. Saying that these people all want to come here and they're unvetted and they're going to destroy the fabric of our democracies is, I think, ridiculous. I'm in the UK as an immigrant. I am now a British citizen, and so I've come the other direction in this. And I think that they're, making it so that all asylum seekers become illegal is not the way to bring things forward. Having pathways to deal with people that are legitimate refugees, legitimate asylum seekers, and then integrating them effectively into the societies. That is an entire, for both the US and in Europe, that is something that is a big part of both the country receiving people and the people coming into that country. And so it's not just as simple as saying, well, we need to make sure we, quote unquote, protect our borders. Of course we do. But then the blanket assumption that anyone who wants to come here is illegal is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, look, you use the word legitimate. The United Kingdom has always been very welcoming of legitimate asylum seekers, be they Jews coming from Russia or from Germany or Austria, or Huguenots coming from Catholic France, or those that fled under Idi Amin.
But then there has to be pathways
when he threatened
for
to
those
wipe
people to
out
come.
the Ugandan agent. But the numbers that came compared to now were minute. And there is a problem. And if I said to you that the level of sexual crime, the level of rapes in Britain, is between 2 and 3 times greater now than it was in 2015, and that people who've come recently into the country are 3.5 times more likely to commit rape, shouldn't we be having an open, adult, grown-up conversation about that without being shouted down?
When you close all of the possibilities for people to come here with a legal pathway and you demonize anyone who does want to come, then that also shuts things down as well. So what are the ways that legitimate asylum seekers can make their way to the UK because they have a connection here, because they have family here, and because of the hope of what the UK offers? I say that as an immigrant to this country. I chose to come here when I got an EU passport back in the day. I could have gone to live in the EU, but I stayed here because I saw the opportunity that this country presents. And there are people who are legitimately going to want to come here because this is the best safe harbor for them because of the problems happening in their countries.
Yeah. Well, OK, that debate will go on and on. Just a quick story here, that an asylum seeker with a receding hairline and facial hair who was estimated to be between the ages of 23 and 25, a judge has ruled that actually they're 17 and so they'll be kept in child facilities. And just a quick comment from both of you. You know, once again, it's our friend Hugo Norton-Taylor. He's the judge that has ruled this. And you wonder that the British public are just furious at this total abuse of our generosity.
Well, I agree with you, Nigel. I think that this is an absolutely absurd situation to be in. There are obvious safeguarding risks associated with seeing adults in children's settings. For example, that individual would be in a position to be able to go to school with children. That just cannot be right. And so that was one of the reasons why I, in government, legislated for far more stringent age assessment work, including the use of scientific methods. This government is rolling that back. I think that this ruling, again, it's just yet the latest in this whole series that is really eroding public confidence in our borders and all of the processes that sit around that. I think that it is a terrible place to get to, and what it means is that we're losing consent for migration as a whole, and that is a disaster.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, it's definitely just a visible age assessment of someone. I have teenage children who are in the age range of what this person has been found to be their age. And I've seen some pretty, some young men and some young women that definitely don't look like they're 16 or 17 years old. So I think just assuming just basic visual appearances is not enough. If this has been done in a judicial manner, if this has been done with people with thoughtful consideration, then you have to hope that's the process. And this is the way the law is written as currently. And, if that's not the way that people like the law, then it will change.
We're going to change the law. The law must change. In a moment, Tony Blair's think tank comes out and says that Ed Miliband's net zero dreams will not produce the number of green jobs and that actually it's damaging the economy. Is at last some common sense coming in on net zero on the left of the political spectrum?
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It was the Conservatives in government who put net zero targets into British law. And pretty much everybody agreed, everybody in Parliament, everybody in the media agreed this was an admirable thing and a good thing, would save the planet and bring economic benefits. Those of us that were sceptical, well, we were written off as being dinosaurs and being totally out of touch. Fast forward to Labour's manifesto last July, and they were promising cheaper energy bills for everybody and up to 650,000 new, well-paid green jobs by 2030. Well, it was quite a claim. Really interesting to see that Tony Blair's own think tank has come out with a report to say we should not have an over-reliance on green policies, and that actually this is likely to produce only 350,000 jobs by the year 2050. And if you think about it, just wiping out our oil and gas sector would be nearly 150,000 jobs. So basically, Blair's think tank is saying we need to completely rethink this. We've massively overpromised what can be delivered in terms of jobs, delivered in terms of growth, let alone the fact that energy bills are going up and likely to stay up. Tom Pursglove, you were in Parliament, you guys started this, Ed Miliband's continued it, and we're beginning to realise that overall it's going to cost a lot of jobs and everyone's bills are going to be more expensive for many, many years to come for a tiny, tiny reduction in CO2 globally.
I think the other interesting statistic in that report that you referenced is the fact that this is only likely to see a 0.1 or 0.2% increase in growth. And so the key thing that I've always argued on this, and you would expect me to say this having been the MP for Corby, a very proud manufacturing town, that I think people want to do right by the environment, but you have to do this in a manageable way that takes people on that journey. And one of the massive challenges, the biggest challenge that faces industries like the steel industry is the cost of energy. That continues to be a challenge. And what we're seeing at the moment is bills ticking up, and that is a huge blocker, actually, to bringing on stream new investment, protecting the jobs that we've got in those foundational industries. And I think that that matters as well from a national security point of view. So I don't, have too much of an issue with the overall ambition of trying to do better by our environment. But we shouldn't do that in a way that sacrifices jobs in those key industries, and we should do this in a way that is affordable for people.
Eric, I'm in your home country, and it's quite a thought, isn't it, that a British manufacturer's energy price is 5 or 6 times higher than that for an American manufacturer. The Brits have just got this wrong, haven't they?
Well, some of that goes to historical tax loopholes that are in place for some of the oil and gas industries in the U.S. to artificially push that price down. But, I mean, if this is a glitch along the way towards trying to move towards an environmentally healthier ecosystem and society and everything else, then that's where we have to, I think, lean into it to find the technological solutions that are going to get us there. Hopefully, if this report, is found to be sound and reasonable and it's not going to deliver the jobs that have been promised and the areas of development that are going to get there, that they assess the plan that they have in place and try and find ways to work around that. We're not going to switch off oil and gas overnight. That isn't going to happen, but it's something that needs to happen because the climate crisis is here and it's upon us, and we can see that in the things happening to my home country, like the fires that were happening in California and the rising seawaters that we have happening here in the UK. So it's necessary and urgent, and so if this isn't the right plan, then hopefully they're going to look at it and find ways that it can be tweaked to get us there.
That's fine. It's all well and good to argue that, but if we close our steel plants down and they go to India and then ship the products back, we're no further forward. Quick thought before we end this segment. Amnesty International are objecting to the British police force using algorithms to predict where crime will happen. They say that it's racist. They even go on to say that police practices such as stop and search are racist policies. Now, I'm going to put it to both of you that the majority of crime, knife crime in London, is black on black, and if that means stop and search is happening in areas with large black populations, the only people being protected are the black population themselves, that surely isn't racist.
Well, the assumption has got to be, like, what is the data that is in these algorithms in the first place? So I would imagine that's where their objection is coming from. So if they're saying, yes, we're taking the data that's available, but if the data available is already skewed in a direction that is disproportionately focusing on minority communities, then that's going to be a problem. And if you're going to use an AI system like this, I'd love to see it applied to white-collar crime as well, which costs us, millions and millions more pounds on a yearly basis than on street crime does. Obviously, street crime is important. Knife crime is awful. I'm not saying that it's not important, and we don't want to do things to address it. But I'd love to see it used on both areas if that's an area that's going to be developed, and it must be the future because AI is everything now.
Well, yeah, I think it will be. It will be. Tom, your thoughts on this? I mean, I think stop and search is absolutely essential in places in parts of London.
I agree with you, and that is a really important tool that the police must have. And these uses of technology are there to try and enhance frontline policing. The sole responsibility of police in this country is to protect the public, and this is a very useful guide that plays, for example, into hotspot policing, targeting areas, getting knives off the street, tackling violence, tackling drugs. And when you look around at the role that technology is playing, for example, there is technology now that is helping the various retailers to guard against knife crime by ensuring that they are able to thread together various incidents that happen in establishments, providing the files to prosecutors to bring those people to justice. There was a pilot last year that saw live facial recognition technology help the Metropolitan Police to pull in 600 people, roughly, some of whom were arrested on the basis of cases involving rape and serious violence, but also things like the use of AI to sweep the internet to be able to identify threats and harm. I think that that's important. There's a role then for humans to play in making judgments, but this is a very, very useful guide to be able to prioritise resources in the right place to protect the public, and I wholeheartedly support that.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Gentlemen, thank you for being on my panel this evening. We're going to take a break, but after that, I'm going to come back and be joined by Tim Kennedy. Tim Kennedy, former, very successful soldier, UFC fighter, Trump supporter, and I'm going to find out what his motivations are for backing Trump as openly and as publicly as he's done.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello, if you're looking for any winter sun, it's going to be wet as we end the week in Portugal, fine in Italy, unusually cold in Greece. Through the Greek islands, we've got this northerly wind blowing, 6 Celsius in Athens, just 7 for Mykonos, that's 8 degrees lower than average. But for Italy, mostly fine with sunny spells, although for Portugal, we've got a spell of rain moving in, and as that crosses Iberia, that's going to turn to showers at the weekend, whilst temperatures gradually recover in Greece.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow, well, kind of more of the same, but if anything, the winds are going to be a little stronger and there'll be more heavy rain around. We've got warnings in place, as we shall see shortly. It's all coming from down to the southwest. These weather fronts are swiftly moving towards us. Today's weather fronts are actually clearing away, so for many, it's actually a bit drier out there this evening, but it won't last because here comes another batch of rain into Wales, southwest England, then across Northern Ireland through the early hours. Some quite heavy rain, as you can tell by those brighter colours. It's been mild today. It will be mild overnight. Temperatures in many towns and cities holding up in double digits, but it will be blustery. Those winds strengthening further through the morning and that rain marching north across Scotland. Once it's in here, it kind of sets in for a good chunk of the day, so it could cause some flooding problems. We have Met Office yellow rain warnings in place across Scotland and a wind warning for southwest Scotland, the east of Northern Ireland, but also for the coasts of Wales, the west and the south coast. Gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour, maybe 70 miles an hour in exposed places. So yes, very windy in the west, very wet in the west. Much of the Midlands, much of eastern England will be pretty dry through Friday morning. In fact, staying dry for most of the day across easternmost counties. But the rain will creep in across the Midlands as it clears from Wales, southwest Scotland, southwest England. Should cheer up a little bit. Some afternoon sunshine is likely, and it will be mild. Temperatures in the teens pretty widely. Could squeak up to 15 Celsius. Obviously feeling a little cooler with the wind. The winds ease on Saturday, and for most it's a much drier day. Bit of a question mark about the rain in the southeast. That could still be around for a time through the day, only slowly clearing. And there will be a few showers developing on Saturday, but overall Saturday looks brighter and drier for many with lighter winds, but that doesn't last. Wet and windy weather returns on Sunday. Bye for now.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel. Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
He's been a soldier. He's been a mixed martial arts fighter. He's been a UFC fighter, and he's now absolutely out there as a Donald Trump supporter, as are many of his fellow fighters and ex-fighters. And Tim Kennedy joins me on the programme.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Tim, your story is a great story. A typical story in some ways of somebody who, when they're younger, is perhaps not quite getting life right.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of mistakes being made. Some pretty embarrassing,
well,
humiliating.
We're not going to go into all of them.
A lot of them.
But somehow 9/11 changes you as a human being.
Yeah, it hurt deeply to be focused on myself, to be focused on what parties I'm going to be, or what pants I'm going to wear to a party, and then I watch a young woman jump out of a building because she didn't want to burn alive, and that I think lit a fire in myself and all of America to demand answers and to fight for something and to fight for each other, our fellow citizens.
So you join the army and you go through the well, pretty grueling training, actually. I mean, getting to be an American Green Beret, it's not exactly a walk in the park, is it?
No. Special Forces selection is pretty notorious and infamous for its difficulty. You know, the Green Beret song that we selected 8 today out of 100.
Yeah.
It's a pretty typical rate of guys that get selected and then move on to training. And then training is grueling. To earn your Green Beret, it takes, after you get selected, about a year to 2 years to go through the Q course and the pipeline. To then be able to don what President Kennedy allowed us to wear, which is the Green Beret.
Yeah.
And it's a badge of courage and pride.
Yeah, and not a peacetime situation for you, but a real wartime situation in Iraq, and kind of hunting down some of the key figures in Al-Qaeda.
That's right. So I got to deploy to Afghanistan and to Iraq. Iraq was my first combat deployment. I was a young man still trying to figure it out. And in Iraq, we were specifically tasked with hunting down and killing Zarqawi. We were part of a task force, a joint task force that was combined with a bunch of special missions units and special operations units, and we did just that. There's nothing more frightening than having American special operations having their power pointed at a specific thing. Yeah. That's about to happen to the cartels. They've been having their way with the American people. And that power is about to be directed at one single group of people.
And there's terrific mutual respect between British Special Forces, American Special Forces. You guys work together incredibly closely.
Very much so. I got to deploy with them as part of the coalition, which is all of our allied partners in Afghanistan in 2007, 2008. And from the Australians, specifically to the British.
Yeah.
True professionals, masters of their craft, experts in every imaginable form of warfare.
Yeah.
And there's a pride in that military that is coming back to the American military. We might have had a lull in the past few years about what it meant to be a service member, but now we're a lethal fighting force with clear standards that I think is going to be a great deterrent to any future conflicts.
Now you go on, you do mixed martial arts, UFC, which of course took a bit of time to really form.
Yeah.
Dana White's given it the most incredible leadership. And Dana White, of course, very prominent in the Trump election campaign.
Yeah.
Trump himself turning up at the fights.
Yeah.
You're one of the cheerleaders. I mean, you're one of the vocal cheerleaders for Trump. Why?
I very much was apolitical. I hated being on social media talking about politics. And around COVID, I have 3 daughters and a son. Around COVID, as I saw, mental health crises rise, obesity in schools. I saw systems in education that were broken as we started going to virtual learning during COVID, where they're talking about, using vaccines on children and parents not having a say in it. I was like, this is wholly un-American. And then censorship. I love the Constitution. I love the Bill of Rights. And when we have found out now that Americans were being censored, newspapers were being censored, stories were being suppressed, our own government was complicit in it, it outraged me because it's wholly un-American for us to try to silence even an opposing idea. It goes against everything that this country was founded on, and it pissed me off. And that's what happened.
No, quite simple.
And so it kind of it forced a large group of people that wanted to stay out of politics, that didn't want to have to go, and they forced us into a corner, just like President Trump. They forced him into the corner, and then he had to fight.
Yeah, no. No, I have to apologise. He used the naughty word, but it wasn't that naughty. It's before 9 o'clock at home, don't worry. So he's in. He's won. He's got the House, albeit it's narrow, but he's got the House. He's got the Senate.
Yeah.
He's got the Supreme Court. He's got the majority votes. And he's talking about a new golden age for America. Do you believe that?
I know that we have wasted precious years in taxpayer dollars, and we have seen fraud. We have seen abuse of American taxpaying dollars. We've seen money laundering from taxpayer dollars into organizations and committees and nonprofits that aren't doing the mission, but rather fighting for partisan ideas.
Yeah.
And this is a waste of taxpayer dollars, and it's cruel for people like myself, a small business owner, to be paying these hard, high taxes and then see them wasted on things that aren't making America greater, but rather eroding the fabric of what it means to be an American. So yes, I do believe that we have a golden age coming for small businesses, for the taxpayer, and for freedom-loving Americans. These should be unifying efforts. This should not be partisan issues. Every American should be outraged about the censorship. Every American should be outraged about how their tax dollars have been wasted. You know, whether it's USAID or FEMA or whatever the next reveal is about Social Security.
So Elon doing an important job.
Very important job. And I cannot understand how people are fighting back where he is pointing about we are paying Social Security to people that are 200 years old. You know, that they have over 20 million people over the age of 100 receiving Social Security. $2.7 trillion is being paid to people not eligible to receive overseas funding. So it's just, it has to be fixed. Yeah. Our government has to be fixed. Our military has to be fixed. Every single one of these institutions and agencies have to be reformed.
And you believe that Trump's going to fix it?
I believe that Trump is a change agent that the American people voted for. And then he is appointed, and now all these people have been confirmed. The Tulsi Gabbards, the Mike Waltzes, the Kash Patels, the Doug Collins, the Pete Hegseths. These are Kennedy. Most of these former Democrats,
your namesake,
have come to fight for this country. Kennedy was running for president as a Democrat. He came to this party, he came to these ideas, as did Tulsi, to fight for America.
Well, it's amazing. Thank you for joining me on the show.
My pleasure.
I've got to tell you, the enthusiasm that there is over here compared to the miserablism of politics currently in the UK is quite something. That's over and out from me. I'm going to hand over to Chris Hope.
Tonight, as good as yours, I'm sure. We've got Thomas Corbett Dillon from Fox commentator, Fox News, James Fishback about the Doge dividend, Michael Gove, Nigel Farage about how Kevin Paddock can beat you as Reform UK leader, Matt Ridley on why he thinks the UK is going to decline, and Danny Shaw, the former BBC journalist, on why people murder. And just finally, panellists Poppy Coburn and Michael Walker from Novara Media.
Okay, over and out from GB News. I'm on the stage here now in about 5 minutes, so I'll report back tomorrow. Okay.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow, well, kind of more of the same, but if anything, the winds are going to be a little stronger and there'll be more heavy rain around. We've got warnings in place, as we shall see shortly. It's all coming from down to the southwest. These weather fronts are swiftly moving towards us. Today's weather fronts are actually clearing away, so for many, it's actually a bit drier out there this evening, but it won't last because here comes another batch of rain into Wales, southwest England, then across Northern Ireland through the early hours. Some quite heavy rain, as you can tell by those brighter colours. It's been mild today. It will be mild overnight. Temperatures in many towns and cities holding up in double digits, but it will be blustery. Those winds strengthening further through the morning and that rain marching north across Scotland. Once it's in here, it kind of sets in for a good chunk of the day, so it could cause some flooding problems. We have Met Office yellow rain warnings in place across Scotland and a wind warning for southwest Scotland, the east of Northern Ireland, but also for the coasts of Wales, the west and the south coast. Gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour, maybe 70 miles an hour in exposed places. So yes, very windy in the west, very wet in the west. Much of the Midlands, much of eastern England will be pretty dry through Friday morning. In fact, staying dry for most of the day across east of most counties. But the rain will creep in across the Midlands as it clears from Wales, southwest Scotland, southwest England. Should cheer up a little bit. Some afternoon sunshine is likely, and it will be mild. Temperatures in the teens pretty widely. Could squeak up to 15 Celsius. Obviously feeling a little cooler with the wind. The winds ease on Saturday, and for most it's a much drier day. A bit of a question mark about the rain in the southeast. That could still be around for a time through the day, only slowly clearing. And there will be a few showers developing on Saturday, but overall Saturday looks brighter and drier for many with lighter winds, but that doesn't last. Wet and windy weather returns on Sunday. Bye for now.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you not one, but 2 chances to win this month, with 2 prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls